The largest chance as well as the biggest crash are on the horizon. Hey guys, I'm glad you're back on my channel. We talk about both good and bad financial news today. For further educational videos, please click the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. According to the IMF, the global economy is likely to face its greatest economic challenges since World War II. It may be negative news as a result. It might, however, be incredibly good news if you're lucky. It's the most contemporary environment I've ever seen, and most people's perceptions of it right now are wrong. Then why did World War II break out? Similar to COVID, World War II is an interesting era because everyone was either interned in their house or engaged in combat. Everyone returned. There was no availability of products and commodities. Global supply chains were disrupted, and as everyone returned, consumption resumed. The rate of inflation increased to say 13% or even higher. Additionally, the rise in interest rates throughout that time made it fascinating, and as a result of the drastic tightening of monetary conditions, the economy immediately fell back into a recession, and rates as well as inflation turned negative. Consumers now pay more for goods even while you are underpaying them. Because individuals could not obtain the items they wanted in the same manner as they do now, everything fell apart. So, before eventually transitioning to brighter times, we went through another recession. Then, since I think it's a very important analogy that most people miss, I go back to the 1940s and 1950s. The next time we saw anything even quite comparable was in 1974. Many people will complain that inflation is out of control and that the 1970s are returning. However, the inflationary crisis that occurred in the late 1970s was significantly influenced by demographics. The sudden influx of baby boomers into the labor force resulted in the biggest demand shock the globe has ever experienced, and we were astonished by the effect of the Arab oil embargo on the supply of oil. Inflation then decreased in 1974. People continue to believe that inflation will never end. No, and neither did it in the 1940s. The following one is 1984, which follows. The dollar was relatively strong, much like it is now. Interest rates were missing, and inflation was high when we observed the issue. There were also numerous trade disputes at the time. Oh, we don't want the early 1980s and late 1970s again with the inflation. Inflation was the common refrain among those who were scared of traveling through time. Volcker tightened rates excessively, which caused the collapse of the economy. The Fed swiftly began lowering rates, preventing a recession, but the currency increased significantly and caused significant additional problems. When everyone had to intervene to stop the strengthening of the dollar from ruining the world economy in 1985, we ultimately set the Plaza record. The following time we noticed anything similar was that age 28. You may recall that in an oil price of 147, there was 6% inflation. The Fed had been decreasing that because the economy was falling in 2018 in the same manner, rising prices for both oil and inflation. The Fed increased rates in an effort to shrink the balance sheet, and as a result, the economy experienced a fast recovery once more. The financial restrictions we have placed on corporate individuals are the tightest in recorded history. China is also slowing down considerably due to lockdowns, but they've also experienced a recession. Additionally, Europe is dealing with the war and an energy revolution. Therefore, this is not a leg of global expansion. Recession is the term used to describe 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. That is the technical description of a recession. Since asset prices are declining as a result of a recession, it means a loss of jobs and a loss in your network. When the Fed prints money, it reduces the purchase power of the dollar. The Fed balance sheet masks all negative aspects of the economy. Most central banks also carry out this action simultaneously. People frequently assume that it will result in inflation. It results in the debasement of currency, which is something more worse and wicked. All of these rare assets, including shares, real estate, gold, and cryptocurrencies, increase significantly as a result of this, but they're merely reflecting the devaluation of the currency itself. As a result, everything may be changed visually, since when everything increases at once, no one feels uncomfortable and the result is changed. Despite being a scam, most people are nonetheless in worse shape. I therefore anticipate that tactic being employed once more very soon. In contrast to the genie who emerged from the bottle in 2020, which is what I believe the Europeans are doing at the moment, the trick is being performed differently this time. Some states in the US are implementing direct transfer payments to individuals, similar to what Japan and India have done. I consider MMT, UBI, and all the other stuff to be Marxist. But you're also considering things from a humanitarian standpoint. Look at the empty offices. Employees aren't showing up for work. After all, this is not your average recession. The Apple has said that they won't take up their previous positions again. You observe how vacant every office building is and realize how dependent residential real estate is on employment. This is why I'm saying that was one of the biggest announcements I've ever heard. The IMF is saying that the world faces one of the biggest economic challenges since World War II. If you're saying recession means a loss of jobs, what happens to real estate estate whenever they have an Amazon office. This is the ripple effect. But one of the topics you brought up was to currency depreciation. Here is a cent then. This is copper, and in 1964, I was observing the identically colored quarters and dimes. It's the same color after all. In other words, in 1964, dimes, quarters, and half dollars changed from silver to copper. Since you were discussing debasement, I believe we are currently paying the price for it. I'm glad you started with history, because macroeconomics is history. When people first did this, as you must do by looking back through history, the Chinese Empire fell because they printed paper money, and the Roman Empire fell because they debased their currency. The American Empire is on the verge of disintegrating. In 1974, we went from everything appearing to be in order to the worst recession since World War II in a matter of 4 months. Due to the rate of price increases and the tightening of the financial system, I believe it will resemble today. Therefore, I believe the next few months will be quite unpleasant, both economically and for the markets. What happens next is the question, and they are the main points. They stop hiking rates if my base scenario, the Fed pivoting, comes into action. They have already begun to raise the possibility of pausing in December. My prediction is that June will mark the final hike, after which they will say, well, we'll just have to see when the economy turns around. They will then begin to believe that we won't make any cuts going forward. Therefore, they won't begin to reduce the Fed's balance sheet, and before you know it, we'll be discussing rate reductions even if there aren't many rates to reduce. Knowing that rates are non-existent, they will only have to print money. Already, there is a drying up of the credit markets. That's typically a sign that the housing market. Remember to debase your money. There is no lack of it. Therefore, if you produce too much of something, it loses value. And what it accomplishes is when one object loses value in comparison to another. Therefore, we aren't producing any additional S&P shares. Actually, we're repurchasing them and producing less of them. The S&P has an impact on real estate prices. We occasionally attempt to construct new real estate, but since it is a relatively scarce asset, real estate values frequently rise relative to their balance sheet. The same is true for gold and cryptocurrencies. The phenomena is that it depends on how quickly they put the balance sheet into practice, since its magic optically changes markets. In addition, companies stop laying off employees when markets improve, household net worth stabilizes, and consumer spending rises. Consequently, it's more of a magic trick. The conventional wisdom was that if you let the system clear, everything would be okay. There is only a recession. Everyone reduces their borrowing, blah 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 blah. The global debt is 400% of GDP. In the entire economic history of the planet, debt has never been a problem. Now let's examine the 1940s to see how horrible things were back then. This scenario was quite similar with the worst supply chain problems, extreme inflation, and everyone returning. However, the economy actually crashed. Then, as the result of the Fed's stabilization efforts and slightly higher inflation, interest rates started to decline and stabilize. Both yields were around 2% and at 3%. Real rates meeting you in the real estate market will therefore be very profitable. As a result, assets benefit greatly from negative real rates, which led to a significant economic boom in the 1940s and 1950s. The value of the war debt started to fall as a result of this financial constraint. The market value of items like houses is available. At that period, the value of the equity market surged by 900%. Because you had to rebuild after the war and businesses were establishing factories, there was a lot of fiscal stimulus. Therefore, instead of reconstructing factories in China, businesses will do so in the United States or in Europe. Therefore, that will receive some stimulation. Indeed, there are no jobs. Although there are robots in the factories, the economy is still being stimulated. As we've discussed, the government will implement some stimulus measures. Rates of interest will continue. There will still be regulated inflation. However, it is a little bit higher than it was. This begins a time of stability and prosperity, which is my optimistic prediction because of the abundance of technology and the potential for significant changes in the globe. I still think there is a good chance that we will manage to get through this in a way that is unexpected, even though it feels like the end of the world. Consider how it must have seemed in 1948. It was the development of technology and the emergence of the US as a significant powerhouse. It was a remarkable time as Japan rose to prominence and Europe was rebuilt. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please share your thoughts in the comment section.